Every new development you do is going to be different than the previous, and it's challenging. So I've had to learn a lot, and I've learned a lot across the years, and now we're finally breaking ground on it's a 500 unit garden style property.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Agostino. There's a level of risk involved in every venture that we start, and it's an inherent part of being an entrepreneur. While I personally believe that real estate offers many, many benefits of risk reduction, it isn't without any risk at all, but it all comes down to operations and how you underwrite a deal. Well, today's guest, he's been through some tough situations and has become really, really good at assessing and mitigating risk around the operations of a real estate portfolio, everything from underwriting to assessing the track record of an operator. So today, as a CEO of TriArc Real Estate Partners, he and his team, they offer property management, investment strategies with a focus on long-term security and yield. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome Joseph Bramante to the show. Hey, Joseph, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, Agostino, glad to be here.
I like what Joseph had to say. You can reach him via his website at TriArc.com. And if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. And finally, if you text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, you'll get our free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Finding a Broker. Okay, Joseph, let's get into your backstory. How did you get started with your line of business?
So I really kind of fell into the industry. I bought my first 26 unit apartment complex more as a hobby. I was working for Exxon at the time, living overseas, and my managers were buying these rental houses. And I was initially going to buy just a bunch of rental properties and kept calling these banks. I was trying to buy 80 of them at once, it was over a 2-year takedown schedule. But still, the plan was to do 80. And bank after bank kept laughing at me and telling me no. And then finally one just said, why don't you buy an 80 unit apartment complex? So that kind of piqued my interest into buying apartments and looked into it. Couldn't afford 80 units. That was too big, but I could afford 26. So me and a friend, I tricked him into investing 50-50 with me. And we went into our first deal from, sight unseen, or at least for me, sight unseen. He was a rotator at the time. So he was able to see the property before we closed on it. But that was basically how we bought our first deal. I read 6 books, did a little bit of research, had the money, and jumped in buying my first deal. No podcast, no mentors, nada. So it was a bit brazen on my part. And then 6 months into the first deal, everything turns to crap. I find out that we're 4 units into our renovation. We get notice that the property has asbestos, so we can't finish the rehab. Send the workers home. Then we find out that the insurance that our broker had purchased was fraudulent, so we don't have insurance. And then the cherry on top was I lost my job at Exxon. So that was, kind of my end of days, Mayan calendar. This was 2012, July of 2012. And my world as a successful Exxon engineer ended, and my multifamily career started at that point.
Wow.
Although little did I know, right? At the time, it wasn't really let's start a career out of this. It was I made a bunch of money for the last 5 years and I put it all into this one deal. I better save this one deal.
That's right. And of course you did. That's why we're talking today, right?
Yeah. So we, fast forward, it took us 3 years because we had to get mentors and really get a good business plan. And we did this massive 30,000 per door renovation on my first deal. Leased the whole thing down to vacant, then did a rehab over 9 months, did an abatement, which was why we vacated the property, because it's not really a good look to have guys walking around hazmat suits with residents on site. You're just asking for a lawsuit. So we vacated the property, did the abatement, did the renovation, leased it back up, doubled the rents, and did a 207% refi 3 years later. So it was, or 2 years later. So it was a big, kind of monumental mark for me in my career. And that was the moment when I decided that multifamily was for me, that I could, up until that point, everything that I knew about it was, I guess, a lot like your listeners. I'd heard stories, I read books, I had seen of other people doing it, but I'd never actually done it myself. And until you've done it yourself, you don't really fully believe in it. It's still a bit, uh, I was kind of flying by instruments, so to speak, for the first 3 years of that deal.
Yeah. No, I know
So,
exactly what that's like. Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't even know multifamily was even a thing when I first started. I was doing the whole single family thing, right? The thing that you were
Right.
talking about before. It's
Yeah.
multifamily is definitely the way to do it. And for all the reasons that we talked about before. But now unpacking this deal though, it's very interesting. So it sounds to me like you at least picked the right location, because if you picked a bad location, you would not have been able to do all that stuff, like double the rents and do all that fun stuff, or even put in 30,000 a
Yes.
door. That's a lot of money to be putting into a deal.
Yeah, I did. There were two things I did right on that deal. One was kind of given to us because the broker and also the PCA report told us that it needed new roofs. So we got that. We built that into the numbers. But the second was location. And I think the second is a default for anybody doing real estate, because since we've all been little kids, we've all heard the saying location, location, location. So if you go and buy a property that's not in a good location on your first deal, then that's your bad, because everybody should know by now buying good locations.
That's right.
And yeah, and that was the one thing we did right. We nailed it. We're in a great location in Houston. We get offers on a daily basis to buy it today as is. And we're currently planning on redeveloping it. So it's not in the cars to sell.
So today we talked a little bit in the green room. You're doing a bunch of other things too now. So aside from development and doing the kind of work that you're doing still with multifamily acquisitions and such, but you're also doing property management. You're handling parts of operations. You're doing a lot of other things too related to the business, right?
Yeah, and it's not really so much me, it's my company, right? So I've got other partners, and so in 2016 I partnered or merged completely with the manager company that I had been using for the last 4 years. So brought management in-house. And there's really two ways you can do that, right? You can either kind of partner, like hire somebody who's got a lot of experience and then make them an employee, and then your company now has it in-house, or you can merge with somebody else, or with another smaller company like we did, that has a lot of experience, and then brought in all their clients with us, so that now we had a cash flowing company already in-house, and that was basically a self-sustaining company. So that's what we chose to do, the latter. And then earlier this year, we brought in construction, same philosophy. We had a construction company we've been working with for the last several years. They've done incredibly well for us. So we went ahead and drafted up terms, brought them in-house. So now we have construction and operations in-house. And then the other thing that we've been working with is new development. So we made our first initial kind of exploration into new development back in 2016. We've been working on a site, really not really talking about it so much because we were learning, right? We're no experts, and there's not a lot of podcasts or books you can read about new development. It's very much kind of open frontier, blue ocean scenario. There's every new development you do is going to be different than the previous, and it's challenging. So I've had to learn a lot, and I've learned a lot across the years, and now we're finally breaking ground on it's a 500 unit garden style property, 2 phases, out in a tertiary market outside of Houston. So that's been fun. And this, like you're always kind of ahead of what you're supposed to be doing. So like we haven't even broken ground on our first new development, and the second and third new developments are already in the planning stages. So we've got density studies with the architects underway, working on investment packages for those, because it's, development is such a long-term thing. It doesn't happen quickly, unlike acquisitions where you can buy a property in 90 days, turn it around in 3 years and exit if you wanted. It might take you 3 years to even get a new development off the ground. So it's completely different pace of progress, and that just takes some getting used to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's projects already looking at, and you and I spoke in the green room about one project that we're working on right now, and we're already thinking about the next one. So we haven't even closed the first one yet. We're thinking about the next one. So, but you're absolutely right. I think there's also the element of not only is a time frame, but I think you kind of get hooked on it as well, right? It's like you just want to keep it growing. That's ultimately what it is, at least for me anyway.
I've got a meeting after this call with our architects for site layouts, and I'm not sure if you've done greenfield development, but man, when you're doing that kind of stuff, you'd be amazed at how much time people spend on site layouts. We've got 7 options reviewing just in this one meeting, and we've already been through about 10 different layout options over the years. It's, it's something that we all take for granted on the acquisition side. They give you a site map and the buildings are where they are. But man, like the amount of thought and planning that goes into placing the buildings where they are to get the maximum efficiency for a site is, it's incredible.
Big part of what you've done previously is the risk management side of things. And we spoke a little bit about it too, especially when it comes to operations. I think that many people listening would agree that the property management side, that's what makes or breaks a deal, right? That's ultimately what it is. Buying the asset is hard. Running it for 10 years consistently, profitably is way harder. So what sort of things, when you're looking at a deal, what do you consider in terms of the operational side of things, if anything, or what sort of advice do you have around risk mitigation when you're getting into a deal, or even if you're developing one?
So for that, I bring in our partners who've been doing this for 30 years each on the operational side. Now, that said, I've been around it for 10 years, so I kind of know what they're going to say already for a lot of the deals we're looking at. A lot of what we look at on the risk mitigation is going to be on what the overall business plan is, right? So for us on our, we're doing a 37,000 per door renovation right now. And so the operations risk management on that deal is going to be different just because we're doing such a big rehab already. We're changing the profile completely. So we're going to a completely different profile. And so it's almost, it's like a mini new development in itself. And so when you're doing big rehabs like that, the business plan allows you to be more relaxed with the operations because you're going to a different profile that's going to be, that won't have any of the, or may not share as many of the bad characteristics of the current profile. Versus if we're doing another property, say we're just doing a light rehab, maybe we're just painting it, putting new counters, and we're increasing the rent $50-$100. Well, that profile is most likely going to stay exactly the same. Their characteristics will be the same. So when you go to operate it, the same levels of bad debt and concessions will probably remain in place for stuff like that. And then also you look at the maintenance side. I think a lot of people, one of the mistakes they make when they're underwriting deals is just because they don't understand the, I guess just how the business works in general. Because when you go to sell a property, anybody who's sold a property knows that you're going to prepare it for sale probably a year ahead of time, and you're going to start getting real skinny on all of your expenses. And then when you go to, whenever the new guy comes in, operates, then all of a sudden they're trying to understand why their maintenance item is, $100 per unit more than it was on the sellers. Well, because the seller maybe was putting their stuff in CapEx, and they started being really subjective in what they considered CapEx versus OpEx. So it's, there's things like that where you just got to know that, okay, well, I know he's showing, this number on his T12, but because of my experience and the other properties I've seen or properties I'm managing on the corner, I know that it really costs this to operate a property on this caliber. So it's really the benefit I get from having the operations is just being able to completely deconstruct the T12 from a seller and see where items are light and then build them in, or see where they're heavy. Because a lot of times one of the items is bank fees. We'll see a high bank fee of $1,200. And some people may just think, wow, they got an expensive bank. But for me, I see that and I realize, they've got a DACA on their account. So the lender that they're using is requiring control of their bank account. A DACA is a deposit account control agreement. But when I see that, then I think, so I just got to make sure that my lender doesn't have a DACA and I can save $1,200 a month. Like easy right away. You've increased the value, increase the NOI by $1,200 a month just by using a different lender and knowing that versus an an existing or maybe a less experienced syndicator might carry that cost over, which will be more conservative, right? And they'll accidentally have value when they close. But for us, we know these things. And so I think that's where we kind of that's where we apply our risk management. And the flip side of risk is the opportunity management, just saying, okay, there's opportunities here, here, and here, because we've, identified, say, a DACA on the account that can be removed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I mean, and part of it too is really understanding line by line what's going on in that asset, what's going on in that market specifically. That part is absolutely huge. I mean, I would guess that, especially in your neck of the woods, you get a lot of these out-of-state guys that are rolling in and they see, oh wow, look how cheap this is compared to New Jersey, New York, wherever they're buying from. But they don't realize that they might even actually be overpaying for stuff is what's happening, right? That happens a lot.
And we see that a lot. I mean, there was a guy who came in and bought like a 1,200 unit portfolio here in Houston, and he bought just the crappiest of crappy deals here in Houston. But he bought them on a price per pound, right? He's like, oh, these are 50,000 a door. Like, how can I go wrong? Well, you're about to find out how you can go wrong. There's a reason nobody wants them. And I think that's like the biggest risk you face as an out-of-state buyer is, of course, a broker is going to have their preferred list of in-state guys that they're going to show it to first. It's going to be the easiest and fastest transaction if they go to somebody local. They don't have to fly down to come see the property. They probably already know the property. They might manage something next door. And so for you as an out-of-state person to come in and buy something, you're already at a disadvantage because it's typically been picked over by all the local guys already. And if it's still available, then it's available for a reason. And I think you just approach with a little bit of humility and you'll be okay. As far as, don't think that, the rest of us missed something. It's like, no, we didn't miss anything. We left it alone for a reason. So I think, we see that in Houston. I'm sure you see it in your market as well. There's Greens Point's a common one. If you hear anybody trying to sell you something in Greens Point, just run. The market is so bad, they've since rebranded it to North Houston. That's how, if a submarket is bad when the city does a big ad campaign to change the name to a different name, just to try and get people, thinking of it differently. They say, oh no, it's not Greens Point, it's North Houston. No, it's Greens Point. You just changed the name, but the same people are still there. So. Right.
I mean, the same problems with the same people, the same problems, the same job issues, all of it's still the same. The culture is the same.
The same dilapidated properties that have been flooded 10,000 times. Yeah.
That's right. But part of it is touching on something you had said is understanding, especially a year prior to selling an asset, the OpEx starts getting skinnier and the CapEx starts getting a little bit bigger. That's great advice, because what happens is, you probably see this all on deals. I've seen it, I'm sure, right? Where there'll be, I don't know, let's say a 200 unit deal, and it looks like their expense ratio is sitting at 50% for a C-class asset in Cleveland. Nah, no way, no way. Yeah. It should be, but chances are it's not. It'll probably be in the mid to even high 60s in some cases, depending on what type of, if it's a high rise or whatever it might be. So all that stuff varies. But yeah, really understanding the asset class, understanding the expense side, understanding where the money is being spent is absolutely critical. Because that's part of the reason why you'd mentioned this before too. The underwriting side of things is really underwriting properly to know what kind of deal you're actually getting. That part is huge.
Yeah, especially in today's market with cap rates being so low. The margin for error is extremely low. When I started buying stuff at 25,000 a door, 35,000 a door, you had a couple at bats per deal. You can make a lot of mistakes and still have really good returns, just because the cap rates for us were compressing the whole time. And so it really didn't matter what we did. As long as we weren't negatively hurting the NOI, we were going to make money. If we just kept the NOI flat, we were going to make money. And that was the reality of what, of our situation. It was very fortunate for us. But now current investors don't have that situation. Now you're looking at record low cap rates. Everybody's talking about expansion of cap rates now, which is going to decrease values. And that's part of the reason why we've really focused on the value add, like heavy value add, not this, lipstick on a pig kind of value add that a lot of people do, but we're doing complete, open heart surgery on properties and changing floor plans, et cetera. Because on those properties, we feel it has the most amount of cap rate risk protection, because we're increasing the rent $500, $600, and so we're able to outpace any kind of cap rate expansion of, well, not any type, but if the cap rate expansion is reasonable at a point and a half, we're going to be okay. Versus if we're going into an already marginal deal and the cap rate expands on us within a 5-year period by 1%, it would kill that deal. I mean, if you're only planning on 3% rent bumps for the next 5 years and you get a 1% increase in the cap rate, you exit and you don't lose money, but your returns are just got shot.
But it sounds like those assets, though, to find them must be a little tricky, right? Because they're going to be, I would imagine they're going to be a lot of off-market type scenarios. They're not going to be like out there because it needs to be in a good area. That's ultimately what it is. We touched on this before. In order for you to get into a deal like that, do a complete gut, so to speak, changing even floor plans and cranking up the rents by $500, $600, $700. I'm guessing you're going to have to find a really good deal in a cherry area is what it's going to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And for us, we cast a wide net. We've got a lot of broker contacts who are constantly in touch with us. And, it's not like we're not specifically targeting those, but when you're in an industry or when you're very active in a particular market like we are, you kind of get pegged as a certain type of buyer. And so brokers know that we're a heavy value add buyer. So anytime there's a heavy value add, they know, call Joseph Bramante. Like, they just know that we're going to be the buyer for it. And we'll have the kind of skill set and underwriting ability to show the value here or not. And so that's where, really focusing on a particular market will be advantageous to you, because you get to know the brokers, they get to know you, they get to know what kind of properties you like. But at the same time, we see every deal. We see all the traditional deals. We're looking at some 7 cap deals outside of Houston, the tertiary markets, and we're finding a lot of yield out there. And we're doing a very moderate rehab there, but because the cap rate is already at a 7, we're not so worried about it going up to an 8. We're thinking that as that market matures, it'll go down, because that's what happens in maturing markets. It's cap rates compress. But we're underwriting it as a flat cap rate. All of our deals have been underwriting same entry as exit cap rate, just for conservativeness. And if it does better, great. But it's not 2015 anymore.
Right. No, it's funny. I've been doing the same thing now myself in my underwriting. Whatever I underwrite it at on the entry is what I underwrite at the exit. That way, if there's any more that comes up, it's bonus, great. So yeah. I count on doing the value add component, not so much lipstick on the pig, like you mentioned, but maybe some eyeshadow as well. But, making it look good, banging up the rents, clean it up, that kind of thing. And, but absolutely, yeah, keep the
one of the other things that typically happens when you're doing a heavy value add is you're also buying it at a higher cap rate as compared to its stabilized value. So it might seem like a very low cap rate based on its current NOI. And so you've got to adjust it for, okay, what is the stabilized NOI once I'm done? And then you'll realize, wow, that's actually like a 9 or 10%. And so when you see deals like that, that's why we focus on the heavy value add, because we're kind of, there's an arbitrage there of the stabilized cap rate once that we're going to versus what we're going to sell at. So in a sense, we're compressing the cap rate additionally. So you get the cap rate compression and you're increasing the NOI substantially. So it's another reason why we really like the heavy value adds.
There's also the operational component you're doing. And you mentioned buying stuff out of state. So you guys basically getting out of your market, expanding your reach, so to speak, and getting into different markets then, or what?
No, we're not that brazen yet. We're mostly outside of our own city. So we'll go within 2 to 4 hours drive of Houston. We've got a pocket of properties out in Corpus Christi. So our market is typically between Corpus and Houston, and within 2 to 4 hours outside of there. So we don't. Oh, okay. We're not up in Dallas yet. I had opportunity to buy deals there, several years ago and past, because Dallas was a completely different market than it is now. And man, I would have made a lot of money if I would have gone there.
That's absolutely true, right? But then again, you'd also be on TV as what's her name, the Cleo lady, right? Telling the future with the crystal ball and everything.
Absolutely. So now we're chasing these other markets outside because I think that's where yield is these days, is these tertiary markets, and investors seem to be more cash flow focused than large exits. So we try to provide a combination of both with what we give them if they want a heavy value add, which is going to be very low cash flow, but a very big exit, we give those opportunities. And then we also look on the tertiary markets for higher cash flowing deals, but maybe not as big of an exit, but still very healthy, high teens IRR.
So now from an operational perspective, you're staying in your own market. It's easier to operate. It's easier to manage. Your team's already there. And that's what I'm assuming. That's your reasoning behind it, right? It's the same reason why we do it.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of lose our competitive advantage, so to speak. So both my partners have been in Houston exclusively for 30 years each. We go outside of Houston that, we don't have as much experience in those markets. And there's a treasure trove of data that we have or within them regarding the properties that we're looking at, because they've typically either managed the property next door, or know somebody who managed that property. And so we get just a ton of intel and insight on properties that we're looking at buying before even touring the property. So it really helps us do our kind of pass fail test really quickly on properties and filter out the good ones. And that's why we've, very fortunately had a very good track record of buying really good deals here in Houston.
So you mentioned you're looking at some properties possibly outside of your immediate area. So what considerations do you have to protecting that asset? Clearly, you have a great operational team. You have developers. You have construction. All that sounds like it's all integrated into one area, and you're dominating your space. To move to try to get into a different city and try to do the same sort of thing and expand, what sort of considerations would you have to make for something like that?
It had to be a big enough portfolio. And so that's why we're waiting. Typically, like, for example, when we went into Corpus, it was because we did a 5-property portfolio. So for the same thing, when we go to other markets, it's not going to be on an individual deal basis. It'll be because we're taking over a portfolio there. And when you take over a portfolio, then it allows you to have a regional. And then the other things that we're considering, say if we really like the market, is then we'll look at other manager companies to either buy. So we'll take over so basically just increase our footprint. So now we've got our owner managed deal and our fee managed deals in that same market once we've identified a property that we like, a market that we like.
I'm guessing though, finding a good property manager is always tough to begin with, let alone buying one, I would guess, right? So how do you make that determination? Like, how do you know you got a good property manager lined up and you're ready to actually be purchased? Like, how do you figure that out?
It's a tough question. And to be honest, I don't know, because I'm not the one who makes that decision. My other partners, they're the ones who do all the interviewing. They know what's up. And it's amazing to me when we tour properties. So when we tour properties, our first tour, we typically roll in 5 or 6 people deep, and them two are all over the office, just asking all kinds of questions, but with a smile, nice as can be. But we leave the property and I just get like a list of dirt on each property. And like, how did you get all this information? They're like, oh yeah, she told me. Like, not directly, but indirectly, you get this stuff, because they are asking very inquisitive questions that the answer the answer that they get isn't really the answer they're looking for. Is indirectly telling them something else. And so I don't know how they do it, to be honest. I don't do operations. I'm on the acquisition side. And to be honest, I got very fortunate when I met them. Our paths crossed, and they have been just a godsend for me as far as the success of our company. And so I don't have any good advice for you for buying or choosing a good manager company, but I'm sure if you ask them, they would be able to help you as far as choosing one. But for sure, though, I know that trust is a lot of it. So for us, we didn't just partner overnight. We didn't just do a deal and say, let's be partners. it was a 4-year arrangement where we were contracted to each other, and we did 4 deals together. And these weren't just regular deals. These were big, heavy deals. Like the first one was the 30,000 per door renovation where we leased it down to zero, and my neck's on the line here. I'm going to have to lose everything I made for 5 years. And they came out and doubled my money. So obviously that left a huge impact with me. And then we did 2 other big rehabs after that, both very successful. And so just over the years, you build a lot of trust with people. And that's when we made the decision to go ahead and partner officially. So I think if you're looking for a good management company, don't try and find the perfect one on the first take, because my first management company we fired after 6 months. So I've hired a guy who was making his foray into multifamily. Before that, he was a single family property manager and thought that multifamily was basically the same thing, but easier, because it's all in one location. Well, it didn't work out. So we let him go. It didn't work out. He cost us a lot of money. He was the reason why, I'm grateful, but he was the reason why we ended up spending so much on our rehab, because he was like, this, I don't want to get into it. Anyway, a bad manager will cost you a lot of money. So if that said though, don't be afraid to hire. You're going to take risk in hiring people every time. So I think Gary Vee says, or I'm not sure who says it, but slow to hire, quick to fire. And
Gary Vee says that. So does Grant Cardone. He says the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see things that you don't like, just go ahead and cut them loose and go to the next manager company, and know that you're most likely not going to get it right on the first time. I was very fortunate. I got it right on the second time. I know people, it takes some mini managers to get it right. It's partly a trust thing. It's partly a personality thing. You just got to find a company that you jive with, and that you really, you guys can, do business well together, because these are long-term investments. You're going to be talking to each other on a weekly basis for many, many years. And that's why I think it's very important that you spend the time before you go into any market. If it's not your own market, if you're going to some outside market, spend the time first identifying manager companies that you want to work with, and incorporate those manager companies into your underwriting of potential assets in that market. And then also just be wary of yes man. So if you get a manager company that's telling you yes to every crazy idea that you want to do, probably not a good fit. I know it sounds good and it feels good to think that you're, all intelligent and powerful and whatnot, but trust me, especially if you're just starting, you're most likely not going to be doing it right out of the gate. And you need a manager company that's going to educate you in a polite way, but and help you through the industry. And I know when I first started, my 2 partners kind of were very hands-on, kind of held my hand, and to where we are today. And so that now I'm still, compared to them, I don't have all the experience, but I'm able to, I know what I need to know in order to buy properties effectively. Now they're going to come in and they're bringing a completely much deeper understanding of it than I ever will. And that's okay. And I think you got to understand that as an operator, as an owner, that you're never going to be as experienced as a property management company or a property manager who's doing this for 30 years. So you have to make the decision, okay, do I really want to master property management and focus on property management? Or am I okay with partnering with somebody or hiring somebody who's got all this experience, and then depending on their experience whenever we're going to buy deals? I've seen guys do it both ways. There's really no right or wrong. It really comes down to knowing yourself and how much of a micro manager you are. And if you're one of those guys who wants to really be in the nitty gritty, you should probably look at doing your own manager company. But if you're okay with staying kind of arm's length away and letting your manager do their thing, then yeah, you might be okay just being an owner and having third party, and then maybe hiring somebody to come in house. I will say one of the negatives to being your own manager company, so like truly doing, like, so say for example, if I were to be managing my own properties directly, one of the negatives of that, if I don't have a partner who's doing it, is it's just a huge time drain for myself, because property management is very labor intensive. You're very much dealing with managers and people on a daily basis. You're constantly fighting fires, and it's going to distract you from growing a large portfolio. So if you have aspirations to grow a large portfolio, then you should strongly consider just partnering with somebody or third party managing all of your deals, because operations is going to take all your time away and distract you from growing.
100%. I mean, in our course, we actually have a training course. So we actually go through a list of questions to ask a property manager. And it covers everything from how do they network? How do they build their business? How many managers per unit do they keep? How do they market? Where do they go? I mean, all those different things. It covers the whole gamut. And yeah, I mean, just like I said, you may get rid of a management company for a variety of different reasons, and it's keeping a regular touch point on a weekly basis. I talk to my management company almost on a daily basis at this point. We have a lot of units, so we're very much engaged with what's going on. It's management it's tough. It's tough business. And but like you said, though, you have a competent team that's backing you up. That's ultimately what it is, right? That's everything. Yeah.
I would encourage you to incorporate more systems and automation into your operations, because it'll help you decrease the amount of touch points you have with the manager company, so that you're getting more of the information you need on a weekly basis and allow you to focus more on growing versus on a daily basis, staying in touch with the manager company. I mean, I still have my phone calls with them stuff happens, I get called. But for us, I'm really, as of lately, we hired a regional recently, and we've incorporated, there's a software called Smart Sheets. It's a universal project manager software. It's like Asana, but it's like if Asana and Excel had a baby, it's this. So we even use that to kind of automate a lot of our, of the interaction that goes on between myself and operations. And so I'm able to decrease the amount of touch points I have with operations, so I can focus more on the acquisition side. So just food for thought.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. Excellent. Good. Well, your business is in a lot of different industries. How do you see the next 5 years playing out? I mean, there's all kinds of shifts that are happening right now in the industrial, commercial, even multifamily, of course. Where do you guys see things shaking out in the next 5 years?
Well, I think that one of the things that this COVID crisis proved soundly is that multifamily is here to stay. I don't think we're going anywhere. I have zero concern over technology or something replacing or causing people to not live in apartments as much. I think that if anything, we're going to see a greater and greater demand for apartment living. So that's my view on apartments. I think we're in a great industry. Industrial is also extremely well, because they're all typically built to suit. So you've got a higher occupancy in those. But yeah, you see the news. If you're in office or retail, I would be very concerned right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a fan. Yeah.
No. But yeah, I think, populations are growing. People are going to need someplace to live. We're providing a necessity, and you're not going to be able to build houses at the same rate that you're going to be able to build apartments. And people don't want to live. We're running out of land. People don't want to live 30, 45 an hour outside of town. They want to live closer to town. The only way to do that is through apartments. And so I think that, especially with the younger generation, it's very much a way of a lifestyle, so to speak. They want to be in the mix of everything going on, the energy of the city. And you can't do that with houses.
Yeah, 100% right. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, if you want to reach out to Joseph, you can reach him through his company website at TriArc.com. Hope you got a lot of really good insight on the operational side of running a very large real estate portfolio. Don't forget to check out his website, reach out to him. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. So take care, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.